First of all, I want to thank you for what you have said in this half hour, talking to my friend Mordecai. And I'm going to ask you some questions on behalf of my little online media humanity college. And I'm also doing something very similar that Mordecai is doing, is basically to create awareness and talking to people about progressive politics and the fact that people are actually fighting back all over the world and, like showing them the rays of hope, so to speak. Yet at the same time, picking up on what you just said about how people can come together and basically assume power. One of the things that as an educator, lifelong educator, following your footsteps, that I am experiencing myself is people's lack of reasoning, and not just lack of reasoning, but complete lack of desire to learn something new that is not, in the box. And that has become like really a very formidable challenge. For example, this year's class, I've been teaching on 2 subjects only, and it's an online class. So basically, I'm concentrating on 2 subjects. One is COVID-19, and the other one is the police brutality and murder of George Floyd and the systemic racism. And so on both fronts, there is a very strange invisible resistance. The resistance about COVID-19 is that when I tell them that, look, in 5 months, in the richest country on earth, here in the United States, we have lost 175,000 people. And Cambodia and Vietnam did not lose anybody up until 2 weeks ago. And many other countries have really strongly taken measures to control the problem. The immediate response is that, well, these numbers are fake. So people who are suffering the most, even they are trying to wish it all away. So my question is, Noam Chomsky is there for us for such a long time, and you have actually shaped our consciousness, so to speak. But at the same time, this decline of intelligence, decline of reasoning power, isn't that in the way of bringing people together and seize power against these corporations and their money?
First of all, they're not making it up. They hear it, they see it. Most of them probably watching Fox News and listening to Rush Limbaugh. That's what they hear. It's all fake. Never hear Rush Limbaugh. There are 4 corners of deceit: science, media, government, and academia. They live on deceit. There's tens of millions of people listen to them and hear that. They hear the president say it. And they hear the people around him say it. So they hear it's being drilled into their heads. And the results are pretty startling. I'm sure you've heard this story about how the COVID-19 was created by Bill Gates and Soros, a couple of others, Hillary Clinton, so they could put chips in you to control you. Turns out around 70% of Americans have heard that. And of Republicans, about 2/3 believe it. Okay. It's not just here, incidentally. One of the things that happens on the internet, and is going to happen more and more, I'm sure, is people posting fake articles and attributing it to somebody that they want to discredit. Okay. It's very easy to do, and there's nothing you can do about it. We're going to see a ton of it, even faked photographs and so on. Well, it's happened to me. When the pandemic broke, things circulated on the internet about how the pandemic was created in a US government laboratory in order to control the world. Big story about that, signed by me, all over the place. I started getting letters from people in Europe friends, sensible people, educated people, saying, thanks for finally telling the truth about the world. It's not just here. This huge propaganda, it's not the kind that says, believe in me. It says, don't believe in anything. That ends up meaning, believe in me. If you're in power and nobody believes anything, you're safe, okay? So it's not, I'm your savior. It's the whole world is crap. Don't believe a thing. Everybody's fooling you. And I stay in power, okay? That's the current form, the dominant form of propaganda. Trump's a master of it.
Yeah.
They play, there's a funny game going on in which he spouts out as many lies as he can think of. The fact checkers in the media that go to work on it, they publish an article saying, oh, it's up to 20,000 lies. And Trump laughs and says, yeah, let's make more of them tomorrow. Because everybody's going to forget about your fact checking if they ever looked at it. And the net effect is going to be, who cares? Everything's a lie. Okay, it's perfect. That's a wonderful technique of creating dictatorship. How do
Exactly.
you deal with it? By exposing it.
Exposing.
You don't check out, oh, he got to 20,000 lies. Who cares? Talk about what he's doing. Talk to your students about what's the point of circulating all of these and the effect of circulating all these lunatic stories. There's an effect. The effect is that people like you are not going to believe in anything, and you'll therefore leave power in the hands of the tiny group that's twisting you around their fingers.
Right.
That's what.
Right, and then this is so important for people to understand, and I really thank you for expressing that in the best possible way that we cannot even think of, and this is so true. If you look at the countries like the United States or Brazil and India, these three countries come to my mind because I know about the United States and India very well. I have lived all my life in these two countries. And then I am seeing the numbers coming out of Brazil. And these are the three countries where basically a new authoritarian rule is in place. And the trend is so alarming because taking advantage of this crisis, the media, social media, corporate media, everybody, the right-wing radio talk shows like Rush Limbaugh and all that, they have created this strange climate where de facto there is a single leader in these countries. In India, you have Modi. In the United States, you have Trump. And in Brazil, you have Bolsonaro. And basically, as if there is no such thing as an opposition. I mean, here in the United States, it's probably just a little bit different. And right now, the Democratic Convention is going on. So many people actually know that there is a Democratic Party in place. But in many other countries, taking advantage of this crisis, there is a huge, artificially pumping up, like a fascistic, semi-fascistic regime where people are not taking anybody else for their leader anymore. How do you fight that?
Same way it's always been done. It's not new. I'm old enough to remember a much worse case, 1930s.
Yeah.
Go back to Germany and Italy, overwhelming support for the dear leader. I mean, nobody has exact statistics, but you look at the scholarly literature, they figure probably over 90% of Germans were supporting Hitler until there started to be defeats, as long as they were triumphant. Maybe virtually everybody. This is the most, and just think of Germany for a minute. It's not a third world country.
Yeah.
In the 1920s, Germany was the absolute peak of Western civilization. Sciences, the arts. Weimar Germany was regarded as the model of democracy for the world. Political scientists thought of it as the best democracy in the world. way on top in everything. 10 years later, it was the worst country in history.
But that was one of the main.
To where it was before. These things can change.
Yes, but in Germany, even though definitely it was at the peak of civilization at that time, and after World War I, there was a huge economic downturn, and actually that many say that that actually gave rise to the power of Nazis and fascists, and if Germany did not go through such a huge catastrophic economic turmoil, then probably Hitler wouldn't have risen. I mean, that is, many people have that, of course, that is moot right now, and we all know what happened. But
it's not mechanical. The US went through the same crisis. What came out of it was the New Deal. Something like that could have happened in Germany. You took a look at the early 30s. There were basically three mass parties. One was the Nazis, which wasn't that strong. The 1928 election, they think they got 3% of the vote. It was before the Depression hit. But the two huge parties were the Communist Party and the Socialist Party. Between the two of them, they way outnumbered the Nazis. If they'd gotten together, they would have won the elections. There would have been no Hitler. They were fighting each other. Okay. Communists were following the Stalinist line of they're all social fascists. Brings back memories to me today when I listen to the Never Bidenites. They're all corporate liberals. Who cares? I'm not going to do anything. That was they're all social fascist line in the 1920s. Social Democrats also had a similar position, not quite that extreme. If they'd been able to get together in the 1932 election, the last sort of legitimate one, they would have easily won. There wouldn't have been Nazis. These are, and in fact, the United States could have gone down that path. Could have. There are plenty of demagogues around. There was actually an attempted coup to get rid of Roosevelt. It was blocked by Smedley Butler, the Marines. If it hadn't been for labor organizing, CIO organizing, other activism, the United States could have gone in that direction. Well, the point is we have choices. These things don't just happen. There always are choices. They are now. We're moving towards it. It's not fascism, but it's kind of tin pot dictatorship. That's what we're moving towards now. Like some small country that has overthrow the government every couple of years. And that's what we're moving towards. Take a look at the New York Times this morning. The peak establishment columnist, Thomas Friedman, the voice of the establishment, says, will 2020 be the last American election? Is this the end of American democracy? I mean, when you hear the voices there, you know that things are in bad trouble. You heard voices in more serious places long before he happened to notice, but now it's reached to that level. Yeah. And it's real.
Yeah.
I mean, it's well understood that we've got a unique figure in parliamentary history, first time, hundreds of years, of somebody who has no interest in the democratic process at all. He wants to end it. He wants to become the dictator. He'll do whatever he can to get it. The inspectors general, the executive are starting to look into your corruption firearm, right? Some one Republican dares to say, maybe you're not God, go after her with a ton of bricks. He said, because no defection. Everybody's got to be a sycophant, worship me.
Yeah.
Look to, and your adoring crowds stand in front of them, look to the sky and say, I'm the chosen one. You know, okay, that's what we're facing. It's clear that he will do absolutely anything to stay in power.
Right.
Could happen, doesn't have to. That means it's going to be necessary to have an overwhelming vote, not just a defeat, overwhelming defeat to try to stop the shenanigans that they're planning, not just him, but the whole gang around him, William Barr, Pompeo, and the rest of them.
So like that is really a scenario that we, shudder to think. But on one hand, you have that scenario where, there is like 4 more years of Trump, and basically that is, in all likelihood, that is the end of a free democracy as we have known it. And then that is something that we all have to work against, and we have to vote him out of power. We have no problems with that. We all know that. But at the same time, the people who will be coming back to power, the neoliberal Democratic Party, what is there for us other than the fact that instead of dying tomorrow, we are going to die the day after tomorrow, if I can say it that way?
Why? I mean, if Biden gets elected, what people who are involved in real politics will do is continue the activist pressure that has pushed the party program this far. Don't say, okay, we won, let's go home. No, you say, nothing's happened. We've got somebody in office who offers us a little space. Now I'll keep his feet to the fire, we'll use it. We'll force them to follow up on their programs and go beyond. Okay, how far beyond? As far as we can manage. No limit. I mean, it's very striking to look at even the coverage of the conventions. Now, take a look at this morning's paper, okay? Both papers, main papers. They're all about the things last night at the convention. They're very interesting. They tell you a lot. So the Washington Post has, more liberal of the two papers, has a long article about the tone of the convention, how the moderates won out, but the far left has a strong voice. Far left, that phrase is repeated over and over. And then it talks about what the far left is advocating. 2 things: universal health care, free higher education. Can you think of any other country that has universal health care? Can you think of one that doesn't? Everybody has it.
Everybody has it.
That's the far left saying, let's try to rise to the level of the world. Free higher education. In rich countries like Germany, Finland, France, poor countries like Mexico, it's all over. That's far left from the point of view of the liberal establishment.
Right.
Okay? And you look at the Times, it's not all that different. All kind of excitement about how wonderful it was to see the roll call with everybody standing up.
And you and I have actually had, for me, it has been a wonderful privilege to, get this chance to talk to you for 20 years now. And I cannot thank you enough for that. But you and I have talked about the politics, mainstream media, corporate media have played all these years, starting from Judith Miller in New York Times and WMD stories that, actually drove the country into a catastrophic war, destroying an ancient civilization and whatnot. And now you are basically, saying things that have always resonated with me, that on one hand, these progressive people, they are actually Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and that group of people, Pramila Jayapal, whom I have known from my immigrant rights days and all that. They are trying to change the course of the discussion, but then they are actually being sidelined by New York Times and Washington Post and CNN. And people are not really getting to know their position because they are being branded as far left.
I don't agree. The media are not saying what I would like, but they're saying things they never would have said 20 or 30 years ago.
That is true.
And what they were saying then sounds so outrageous, you can't believe it. I mean, you see the coverage of the Vietnam War. Take the far left of the mainstream, far left at the end of the war, 1975. 1975, the war ended, everybody had to make a comment. Way at the left end, you had Anthony Lewis of the New York Times. And what did he say? He said, the war began with blundering efforts to do good. Evidence? Who needs evidence? The United States did it. It was efforts to do good. You don't ask any questions. Blundering because it didn't work. He says, by 1969, it became clear that we could not bring democracy to South Vietnam at a cost acceptable to ourselves. So it was a mistake. I mean, it's kind of like somebody writing in the Communist Party press. Meanwhile, the public had an opinion, which was not reported. There were careful studies of public opinion, Chicago Council of Foreign Relations. 70% of the public at that time said the war was not a mistake. It was fundamentally wrong and immoral. And that lasted as long as they were taking polls.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing like that anywhere near the media. Now you could say it. Not enough, but you could say it. You can't say we're just overflowing with kindness and love in everything we do, the way it was said then by people like James Reston, their leading left columnist. You can't say that. Take a look at what you can say now. Take, say, the 1619 series in the Times, History of African Americans. Had its flaws, but it was a very strong report of 400 years of violence and repression and terror.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, you couldn't have possibly had that. Okay, it's changing.
It is
Partly it's changing because a lot of the journalists have come out of the experiences of the 60s and 70s. They see the world differently. So you change the culture, you change the media.
Yeah, definitely. That brings me to another question that I have asked you before, and I'm going to ask you one more time, because I am a first-generation immigrant from India, and I have gone through my own struggles of, fighting against, like explicit and subtle racism all these years, 35 years of our existence in this country. First as a poor foreign student, and then as a permanent resident, and then as an American citizen. So I have had my share of racism and all that. And then I have seen, the extreme brutality and systemic racism on our Black brothers and sisters, and George Floyd being one of the most recent examples. But at the same time, there is no bridge building across the board. Blacks and immigrants and whites, and even within the immigrant community, people do not turn to each other.
That's not true. I just don't agree. Take, say, the brutal murder of Emmett Till. No reaction.
Mm-hmm.
Take George Floyd, nowhere near as bad as Emmett Till. Huge demonstrations, black-white solidarity all over the place. More public support than any social movement has ever received in the United States, 2/3. With black-white solidarity. It's not Emmett Till. Okay.
Oh, definitely. Black-white solidarity, I see that all the time, but I'm actually talking about, in particular, the solidarity between the two poorest sections of the society, the Blacks and the newer immigrants, Latinos and Indians and Pakistanis and Bangladeshis. And, there is such a huge, like, invisible wall between the two poorest and most vulnerable sections of the society.
The wall wasn't in the streets. The wall was blacks and whites marching together. Okay. And it wasn't just for a one-day demonstration on the National Mall in Washington. It was months. And it's also working on real issues together. Okay. Not perfect, but a big change. So that's what you're after. Change. Make things better. Sometimes things get worse. Much worse, like India. India is going through one of the worst moments in its history.
Right.
With, a racist, ultra-religious lunatic who's got about 70% support. That's scary. That's kind of like Germany in the 30s and the 40s. But that can end too, has before.
Thank you. One final question, if I may ask you, how do you see, if I may ask you, how do you see a world post-Chomsky?
Same as it is now. Other people will be raving, ranting, just like I am, just as they are already.
I can ask you that question because I have known you for such a long time, and I consider you to be my friend, philosopher, and guide. So forgive me if I have asked it in an inappropriate way. But I cannot really express my gratitude enough for what you have taught me all these years, and you have really been a living inspiration for me. And I really want to thank you enormously for that.
But the people we should be looking at with inspiration are the people in the streets. They're the ones who are really doing things. It's always been like that. You want to look at the civil rights movement, everybody thinks of Martin Luther King. Not enough of us think of the SNCC workers riding freedom buses in Alabama, risking and sometimes losing their lives to try to get intimidated black voters to vote. They're the ones we should be honoring. And that's true everywhere. That's so they're the people who matter for tomorrow. We can respect them. We can use their work and sacrifices to get an audience for their benefit, and respecting them, they're the leaders.
Professor Chomsky, we got 2 minutes, and I'm sure you've been asked this question before. Dr. West always talks about the difference between being a short-term or a long-distance runner and a sprinter. You've been a long-distance runner in your career. How have you, kept the march going? Like, what did you do to fortify yourself and sustain yourself to be able to be a freedom fighter, from when being the first vocal voice coming out against Vietnam to all the way to today, still being out here doing calls with people that you don't even know? Like, what keeps you going, sir?
People like you, people who are picking it up, carrying it forward. As long as they're around, you don't need any more motivation. Or looking at the people in the streets, or the kids in Sunrise Movement who managed to get the Green New Deal on the legislative agenda. Or take a look at, I've seen it all over the world. I've been in many parts of the world with real intense poverty and terror, way beyond anything we're experiencing. So very poor village in Southern Colombia, miles from the highway, can barely get to it by the road. Where when you get to the village, you pass a little place where there's white crosses where people were murdered by paramilitary. You finally get to the village, you see engaged, active people, very poor, very little formal education, working on the means to try to save the mountain near them, their hydrological resources, from a gold company that wants to destroy it, gold mining company. You see people like that, you don't need any more inspiration. And it's all over.
I just wanted to thank you one more time on behalf of Humanity College. And if you have any final message for the younger people who are coming together, writing in a new way, reporting in a new way, doing citizen journalism on the street, that would be really wonderful. I would much appreciate any message for them.
Message for them is to look at the world around you, at the vast problems that exist, at the suffering, the repression, the threats to survival, and pick up your pen. These days it's your computer. Start letting people know about it, investigate it, bring it to others in any way you can. That's your job as journalists, as intellectuals, as organizers, as activists.
Thank you very, very much.
Amen. It was a pleasure, sir.
Thank you.
Good to talk to you. Sorry, I got to get off, but I got the next one coming. See you later.
Okay, thank you.